as well.
Admin, I'm still not getting the attendee list.
You need to click on participants. Attendees are in now.
Okay, thank you. Admin, I'm still not getting the attendee list. Right, good evening everybody and welcome to this meeting of Biggleswade Town Council. I'd like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be filmed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. Can I please request that when councillors and members of the public are speaking, not to disclose any personal information of an individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach data protection regulations. This is a formal town council meeting and will be held just as those in the town hall using the agenda which the clerk has published. As with our usual meetings, members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak during public open sessions, but will not be permitted to speak at other times. We have an IT admin person who has the ability to mute or remove anyone who causes a nuisance, but of course we hope this won't be necessary. When you're not speaking, will you please mute your microphone, and this will help to eliminate background noise. And it's impossible to hear if everyone speaks at once, so it's essential that we speak one at a time. And I'd ask everyone please to be patient around the use of this way of holding meetings. We're still learning this new way of working. Thank you, everybody. Do we have any apologies for absence? No? Okay, none. Do we have any declarations of interest in any item on the agenda, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary? I'm not getting any indications, so no. And of course, I don't have any town mayor's announcements. There haven't been any civic events. Public open session then. Would IT admin like to just tell the public how to put their hands up with the electronic hand, please?
Yes, you should have the option to put your hand up on the list, and if you do that, people are already doing that. That's fantastic, and then you'll be asked to come in and speak, and I'll allow that. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got two people wishing to speak. Can I ask first Carol Birtwistle?
Carol's in the room now.
Good evening. Would you like to speak to council, please? And it's the usual rules. It's 3 minutes for each speaker and a total of 15 minutes for the public open session. So your 3 minutes starts now. Is your microphone on? I'm not hearing anything from Miss Birtwistle. I've got indications from other people. Shall we come back to Carol Birtwistle, please? I've got an indication from Timothy Soden. Mr. Soden, would you like to speak now, please?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Cool. Just a matter on the station. I would ask the Town Council to push for the retention of the existing bridge, as its removal would lengthen the walk quite considerably from the whole of the east of the town. And just briefly on the land north of Biggleswade, although I personally have no real objection to the plans, and in fact the plans seem quite sympathetic, having only one access down Furzenhole Road would mean an extra 1,000 odd vehicles using the junction with Potton Road, which I believe is unfeasible.
Thank you, Mr. Soden. And can I reassure you straight away that the existing railway bridge is intended to be left in place? And we'll talk about that in more detail later. Okay, I've got Mr. Martin Kernan wants to speak, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. It's in respect of one of the planning items, item D.
Yes.
Oh no, sorry, wrong one. Item A. I'm a resident in Wharf Mews, and this is an application that relates to retrospective planning application. The builder has built the wrong house, or the developer has built the wrong house, and it is substantially bigger than the planning conditions that were granted. And obviously, as a local resident, we feel, or I feel, that it's wrong that a developer can just simply submit retrospective planning, which is agreed, as this undermines the need for planning approval in the first place and removes public confidence in the planning system. Just to say that the rationale and consideration of the case officer in his original support for the original application was the proposed houses fronting Wharf Mews would be a comparable scale to those that they would face and would sit comfortably in the street scene. With this oversized house, this is now me, I can assure you that this is not the case. And it is a huge overbearing structure, not in keeping with the surrounding properties. And it potentially affects the residential amenity of existing residents and significantly increases the casting of shadows over these properties. And I would like to invite the town council to come and actually visit Wharf Mews and actually see the house. And what I would say is that the developer has not stopped building this house. It's fitted out, even though, you know, it's undecided whether the retrospective planning is approved. And I think that in itself says something about the current situation.
Thank you, Mr. Kernan. I think we've understood exactly what you're saying. Now, Councillor Fage.
Can I just identify, just at the beginning, it's 8B, I believe. Is the property 43 Maunders Road, not
no. It's land at the rear of 33 to 57 Shortmead Street, the development next to Wharf Mews.
Right, I just want.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it's 8E, Madam Mayor.
E.
Yes.
I do apologise if I've got the numbers wrong.
That's all right, don't worry. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kernan. Is Carol Birtwistle able to join us now? We still can't hear you, Miss Birtwistle.
Right now.
Hello? Hello? I'm sorry, we haven't got Carol Birtwistle now. Can we move on to Councillor Whitaker, please? Councillor Whitaker? You're muted. Are you going to speak to us?
I am going to speak to you. I'd love to. So planning application 8G for London Road. I have been in discussion with Central Beds about this application simply because the plans that have been submitted are quite poor and lack sufficient detail to really make any comment on. And I've received news this evening that they have asked the applicant to submit more detailed plans and that these will come back out for consultation. So that's just for your information. And also with regard to the railway station plans, I think somebody has already mentioned the existing railway bridge, but I think serious consideration does have to be given to trying to get this installed as a right of way rather than just relying on the goodwill of Network Rail.
Thank you, Councillor Whitaker. Does any other member of the public wish to speak? I'm not seeing any other indication. Okay, I'm going to move on now to item 5 on the agenda, which is members' questions. Do any members wish to ask questions? Councillor Foster. Sorry, Frank Foster, I should have said.
Okay, thank you. Bearing in mind that virtual council meetings are now possible and will continue for the foreseeable future, will the acting town clerk please confirm that the published schedule of committee meetings will now resume, with the next such meeting being that of the Town Centre Management Committee at 7 p.m. on the 2nd of June.
I cannot, Madam Mayor, I cannot confirm or deny. I would take guidance from the council, but I would say that we would find it really difficult at the present time with the current method of working, where people are still required to work from home, to produce agendas and supporting papers for any meetings. And it was the intention, I believe, to bring all matters that would come to a committee meeting to actually come to the full council for the period of the lockdown.
The councillors have never approved this policy.
Well, maybe we can approve it at the next meeting then, Councillor Foster, because it is very difficult to keep to the schedule of council and committee meetings with the way staff are having to work at the moment. But we can always, if you wish, to put it on the future agenda.
I'll be quite happy to put it on an agenda, but I can't really see why it is so complicated to actually make it happen for the 2nd of June.
We'll put it on the agenda and it can be discussed in detail.
Okay, thank you.
Does any other councillor wish to ask a question? Councillor Fage, Grant Fage.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate our outdoor staff are doing a great job at the moment under difficult circumstances. But one outdoor area which has always been a bit of a bugbear for me is the north entrance into town, specifically Hill Lane and the Sainsbury's North roundabout. I know it's not in the parish of Biggleswade, so really shouldn't be our responsibility. But given that traffic on the A1 and down Hill Lane is much lighter as a result of the lockdown, I was wondering if we might be able to write to Norville Parish Council, and I'm happy to draft the letter if required, to write to Norville Parish Council to ask them to sort of use this slightly quieter period to consider cleaning up what is quite an important entrance to our town. It's the first impression that people have of Biggleswade, and at the moment it's not a great one because it's a bit of a mess. So I was wondering if we're okay to write that letter and ask them to fulfil their responsibilities in making sure that it's clean and kept nice.
I'm sure we can do that, but also to work with Norville Parish Council, because I think the boundary actually comes down Hill Lane. So it may be that we have some responsibility as well. Any other questions, please, from members? Councillor Woodhead.
Yeah, just two quick questions, Madam Mayor. The first one was really, if I could be so bold as whether the council could give thanks to the Sea Cadets for giving the socially distanced last post on VE Day last Friday, because I think it was well received by all that were there and aware of it, and I think it gave a different sort of focus to the day that perhaps people were expecting. So that's the first one. And then the second one is, and maybe Councillor Strawn may have the answer to this, if we're able to get any more information from Bedfordshire Police about the stabbing on Eagle Farm Road. I know it's quite a serious incident, and whether there's anything that they can share with us, or our police liaison can share with us, because it's quite clearly a serious incident and people have been ended up in hospital over it. So we can reassure residents, basically.
Does Councillor Strawn know anything about this?
I'm afraid not, Madam Mayor, but I'll make some inquiries.
Thank you very much. As far as the Sea Cadets are concerned, it was very good. It's unfortunate that it couldn't be publicised to the town, because obviously there would have been too many people around the War Memorial. But it was very nicely done, low key. But they played the last post immediately before the 2-minute silence, and it was very well done. Okay, I'm moving on to minutes and recommendations of meetings. So it's the minutes of the council meeting on the 28th of April, which we've all had copies of. So I'm going to go through as usual. So this is for accuracy. Anything on page 1, please? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7? Or page 8? Councillor Leslie Fage?
Yes, item 11A, it was raised by Councillor Fage. I think it should be G Fage, just to clarify that, really.
Thank you. Yes, we can add that initial in.
Just to get it correct.
Thank you. I didn't get, Councillor Woodhead, you got, you're still showing your electronic hand. Okay, so that's accuracy. So may I sign them as a correct record, please? Yes, I'm not getting anybody shaking their head. So now it's matters arising. So page 1, any matters arising? Page 2. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Could I ask the town clerk for an update on the defibrillator, please?
On which, sorry?
5B, the defibrillator in Century House.
Yes. There's been a lot of work going on in the background and some progress is being made. We've had to basically go through the ambulance service, who have been undertaking some investigations. They now have the registration, I think they call it's called the registration number or whatever it is of the particular device, and they are basically doing a search because they believe it has been used, and if they can find it, then it will be returned. If not, then we will have to get a replacement through them.
Oh, okay, so it's actually gone missing then?
Yes, it has actually gone missing. We believe it's been used, but we don't know when. And the office manager is basically liaising with the ambulance service to try and see what's happened.
Okay,
but we do have reference numbers and so forth.
It's unusual, isn't it, Mr. Clark, because it went missing without any damage to the casing, and the normal procedure is for somebody to dial 999 to get the code to release the defibrillator, and then at the same time the emergency services send an ambulance. That didn't happen, so it's very difficult to know exactly how the defibrillator went missing without any damage. But we also understand that exactly the same thing happened with the defibrillator in Baldock, which had been supplied to Baldock by the Rotary Club. So something very funny has happened there. Okay, so that was page 2. Any matters arising on page 3, please? Councillor Pullinger. Councillor Pullinger, you're muted.
Apologies. Please, can we have an update from the clerk on item 5C, I think it was, the access to the Facebook page?
Yes, I'll give a short answer here, but I might like to say more in part 2, if I may, Madam Mayor. Essentially, we now have the code to allow access to the page, but there seems to be some block about writing it. I will, in fact, and I've already talked with Node about this, be getting in contact with Node because they believe that they can unblock it. That is the situation at the moment. So there's progress being made. We're halfway there. We're in a better position than we were before because it can now be accessed by the town council officers. But actually writing or posting to it is something which is not happening at the moment, although attempts have been made.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on page 3, please? Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Okay, I'm not getting any more indications. So let me just make sure I don't put the wrong things to one side. Okay, so we're now on to planning applications. So the first one, item 8A, is 40 Potton Road, 2-storey side and rear extension. Any comments, colleagues? I'm not getting any indications.
Move no objection, subject to neighbours.
Is everybody happy with that? No objection, subject to neighbours? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next one is 43 Maunder Avenue, a 1-storey rear extension. Any comments, please?
Subject to neighbours, please, Chair.
Everybody happy with that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item C is Building 3 on Stratton Business Park. Building signage detailing business name. Any comments on this, please?
It's just straightforward signage. It all looks uncomplicated and it's very clear to me.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Brown, are you indicating? Councillor Brown, did you wish to speak?
You're on mute,
No.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, I thought you were indicating to speak.
Was this 8C? Sorry, you didn't catch it.
Sorry, what was that?
No, no comments.
Okay, thank you. So I think Councillor Foster is proposing no objection. Did Councillor Ramsey wish to speak?
I just wished, having looked at the site map, it doesn't appear that the signage is going to impinge on the London Road at all. It's down the side, so I don't see any objection to that.
Okay, so no objection is being proposed and it's been seconded. Are we all happy with that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you please wave your hand if you're not happy with that? Not happy. Okay, thank you very much. 120 London Road, 1st floor extension incorporating a loft conversion. Any comments, please?
No.
No?
Objection, subject to neighbours.
Sorry, Councillor Fage, did you say something?
I said, sorry, no objection, subject to neighbours.
Are we all happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Now we have item E, which is the land at the rear of 33 to 57 Shortmead Street. And we've heard from Mr. Kernan that the house style, this TH2 house type, has already been built without planning permission and is taller than the house that was given planning permission. So colleagues, your comments, please. Councillor Alban.
Yep. Given what we've heard, the plans, it looks like the houses are very tall. I didn't realise they've been built yet, but if they have that kind of impact on neighbouring properties, then I think we should object, regardless of whether the building is actually complete or partially complete. I think we should be thinking of this as a planning application rather than a retrospective planning application. And yet they do seem to be overbearing to me. So I would move that we object.
I second that.
That's seconded. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I was going to object anyway before the resident complained, because if you look at the application, it's got the public application form and the proposed plan and elevation, but there's no detail in the surrounding buildings. And I wonder if that is now deliberate. I haven't heard what the local resident said. So I was going to object on those grounds.
Okay,
no
thank you.
detail.
I've got Councillor Bond and then Councillor North. Councillor Bond.
Good evening. I've looked at this planning application and I've actually asked the officer for details as to, it's very clear the building that's being built does not actually match the planning application, planning permission that was granted. I'm still waiting for an answer back. But one must bear in mind that when this planning permission was actually granted, it was actually quite contentious at the time, especially bear in mind the height and the proximity to other buildings. And the fact is that what's been built breaks all those rules. I think we should actually, as town council, actually object to it, because it is this variation condition is actually more like a new planning application trying to justify what's actually being built. We still have no answers to reason, but no reason as to why they varied from the approved plans. I'm still waiting for an answer back on that.
Thank you. Councillor North.
Yeah, well, I just agree with others to say that I think we should object for the reasons that have been discussed, that it's too high, with too much impact on surrounding buildings.
Thank you very much. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we're objecting, and I've had no difficulty with the objection and the reasons being put forward, we must be quite specific on the planning grounds upon which we are objecting. So if someone who's proposed the objection could actually summarise the specific planning grounds for the objection, such as height, overbearing, out of keeping with the character of the original application. But we must have the specific planning objections rather than just saying we object.
Well, this is Councillor Albin's objection. Councillor Albin, did you want to come in again?
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned the height and the fact that it was overbearing and the impact on the dwellings that are already there, the neighbouring houses. So I think that covers everything that's been said, I hope.
Yes, and I think the other thing that was mentioned was that we objected in the first place to an original application because we had more than one come to this council, and we objected in the first place not only on the number of dwellings but also on the height of the buildings. So I think we could say, that we've already objected to buildings of this height on this site.
Yep.
Councillor Page. Grant Fage.
Thank you, that's fine. Yeah, just one suggestion then. I mean, if it looks like this is essentially trying to cover up changes to an existing planning application that, they've built it and are now trying to cover their tracks, perhaps we could ask Councillor Bond to consider calling this in, because we had objections to this in the first place. They're very tall buildings, quite a dense concentration as well, and if it's going to have material impacts to our residents, and if there's potential for unscrupulous behaviour going on here and not adhering to the original planning permission that was granted, I think that's something that perhaps DMC should be considering as well, if there's merit in doing that. But this sounds like the sort of thing which perhaps we could consider calling in if possible.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Bond?
Happy to do so, yes.
You're still showing you wish to speak. Councillor Bond?
Not anymore, no. I will take what Councillor Grant Page has said, and if it is approved, if the officers are likely to actually go for a recommendation of approval, I'll ask for it to be called in.
Thank you. Okay, so we're objecting on the grounds of the height of the building, that it's overbearing, that there's a serious impact on neighbours, and that with a previous application, we'd already objected to buildings of this height. All those in favour, please, can you show?
I think Councillor Pullinger is wishing to speak.
Were you wishing to speak, Councillor Pullinger?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I was just wanting, I'm voting in favour along with everyone else. I was just going to say, I think that Councillor Strawn's wording around specifically being out of character with the originally approved application was particularly good wording that we should adopt in the objection.
Okay. Well, before you spoke, sufficient people were indicating that they were in favour that is passed, so we are objecting to that planning application. Does anybody wish to vote against? No, thank you very much. I'm moving on to item F, which is land adjacent to Unit 2, Juno Place. Erection of a single industrial unit, approval being sought for layout, appearance, landscaping, etc. Any comments from anybody, please? Councillor Fage, Grant Fage.
I have no objection to this. It's relatively in keeping with other developments in on the industrial estate. So happy to propose no objection. One thing I might just add though, is we are accepting a huge amount of industrial development in Biggleswade. We already have. A lot more is due to be built, and all of that should be coming with Section 106 money attached to it. And we can't, when we see big applications like this, if I could just gently nudge our central beds councillors to be hunting down where that Section 106 is going so that we can have a bit of transparency over it. Because we often associate Section 106 with residential developments, but the industrial stuff does come with it as well, I understand. So when we see applications like this, I know our central beds councillors are very good and are all over it, but they can be specifically hunting down where that Section 106 is going, and so we can get a bit of control over it and a bit of transparency over it. I think that would be for the benefit of the town.
Thank you very much. Does somebody second that? Thank you, Councillor Knight. Anybody else wish to speak, please? Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like the council just to take into account the consultations that have taken place, and particularly, I think it was Savage and Sons were mentioning the speed of traffic on that road, and that perhaps should be mentioned to Central Bed's comments in our observations that there was concern over the speed and amount of traffic that would be generated.
Okay, I think that comment can be made if Councillor Fage is happy with that. Yeah, I'm getting a nod. Okay, so all those in favour of no objection, please. Yeah, I think that's everybody. Thank you very much. Item G, 4 London Road, Biggleswade, change of use from beautician back to house, which is obviously what the building was before. Councillor Woodhead and then Councillor Frank Foster. Councillor
yeah, thank you. I've just had a look up there actually this afternoon, and I don't have any necessarily objections in principle to it reverting back to its original state, but I do have a concern that at the moment there is the Stratton Guest House next door to it, which takes up most of the sort of parking space. And I think for a private residential house, there would be very limited parking or garden space. And I would be very interested to know how the either developer or the builder would be addressing that. And I think that's just a concern, because if they're going to then recoup some of the parking space, would that push more vehicles on the road? I know it's double yellows, but I just think I've got concerns about the parking access to it, but not necessarily the conversion in principle. So I think we need to bear that in mind. I don't know how it relates to the existing businesses there. I think we need to consider that.
Well, I do know that the whole site is in single ownership.
Right.
So it's going to be sold. I've got Councillor Foster and then Councillor Strawn. Councillor Frank Foster.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say how pleased I am to see that this building is actually going to be put into use immediately and not left to deteriorate. This is really good news. As far as the parking situation is concerned, I think if you check on the plans, there is adequate parking there. I think there's parking from memory for about 6 cars at least. But I'm just looking at the plans earlier on. I don't think there's a problem with parking.
My concern, sorry, just to interrupt on that, is that it's shared with the guest house, and I'm worried that when the guest house has residents there, where's that all going to go? And it's just not very clear. And listen, we don't want to create a problem for ourselves pushing more vehicles onto the street. But I'm happy to, if people know more about it. But I know that area quite well, and it does. I've got suspicions about it, but that's my only concern. Otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Strawn. And then
my concern is I think the planning application, it specifically refers to just one parking space. I've got no difficulty with the principle of it being converted back to residential, but looking at the size of it and the number of bedrooms, I don't think one parking space is adequate. And I think the council could object to it unless there's sufficient parking. And I think there should be 2 parking spaces specifically allocated. I think it's all within the hands of the applicant to arrange that. But I think the one parking space they referred to is unacceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Grant Fage.
No, I was just going to say maybe we could add on a comment as well about a little bit of clarity over what the actual designs are, because as Councillor Whitaker said in the public open session, I was actually struggling to work out what they're trying to create here to some extent. So maybe I know that detail is going to come anyway, but we may as well note that, because we would like to, I know I would certainly like to see a little bit more detail before coming to a final conclusion.
Okay, so at the moment, I think what we're saying is that there's no objection to the conversion to a house, but we're concerned about the number of parking spaces because only one is shown, and we're also concerned about the detailed design. So Clark, can you just advise me, do we put in a holding response on this?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I think you, and it's difficult to guide members on this because it really is a matter of opinion and degree. I think you're torn between no objection but subject to parking being adequate, or actually objecting. I don't think there's anything in between really.
So are we allowed to, we can put in a holding objection, can't we?
Well, you can. You say subject, you know, we object until, I mean, that's the other way, until the parking situation is sorted out and is adequate for the size of the property.
So we can put in a holding objection saying until we have more detail on the parking, which seems to be insufficient, and more detail on the design. I've got two people indicating to speak, Councillor Pullinger and then Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm not sure if you have a proposal, but if we haven't, I would propose that we object at this time due to insufficient detail, particularly around the parking, and that's based upon what we've discussed as well as what we heard from Councillor Whitaker earlier. I'm just looking at the application form. It says 1 to 2 parking spaces. Is it 1 or is it 2? I mean, it can't be both. So I think we'll do I propose we do a holding objection on the backgrounds of we've got insufficient information on the current application.
Thank you, Councillor Alban.
Yeah, I wonder if I could be helped here, because I haven't got the plans in front of me at the moment, but looking at the plans earlier, it was only part of the building that seemed to be involved in this planning application, and there was part of the building which was labelled coffee shop, which isn't. It doesn't look as if it's going to be part of this conversion back to a dwelling. So if it's the case and it's not the whole building, then that would have an impact potentially on parking if that business carries on, although it wasn't a coffee shop, so I don't know what that actually means, or whether the plans aren't very good. So I don't know if anybody else has noticed that and has got any comment on what that might be, what that might mean.
Councillor, sorry, I thought somebody was indicating and they're not. Does anybody else wish to speak, please?
Just one other thing. I mean, as Councillor Albo mentioned about the coffee shop, I'm reliably informed by my wife, who used to go in there, that there was a coffee shop inside the premises, and I think it may have had separate access and exit points. So that may be what they're trying to split out. But obviously the planning application covers the whole of the building for London Road. So again, there's some more confusion. If they wanted to sort of subdivide it, then that's a different matter altogether. So I know there used to be a coffee shop in it at one stage as part of the broader business, but whether they're wanting to bring that back is not very clear. But again, it still goes back to the parking issue as well. So I think we should put in an objection at the time being, and for waiting for more detail.
Okay, so sorry, Councillor Strawn.
Yes, from my recollection of the plan, it was quite clear that the main square building was the part of the application was for conversion back to a residential use. I don't think the application included the little side bit which includes the so-called coffee shop. I thought the application plan was quite clear in that respect. I haven't got it in front of me at the moment, but I thought it was quite clear from looking at it that it related to the main square part of the building, and the little narrow wedge going down into Dells Lane was excluded.
Thank you. So at the moment, we've got the proposal for a holding objection on the basis that we need more detailed plans, that we're concerned about parking because there only appears to be one parking space, and that we're not sure whether the item on the plan that is coffee shop is included or not. So there are three things there why we want to do a holding objection. Can I have all those in favour showing, please? That's everybody. Thank you very much. And then 162 Hitchin Street, single story rear extension. Any comments? No?
Subject to neighbours.
Okay, so everybody happy with subject to neighbours? Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. And now on to item 9, which is items for consideration. And the first item is the proposal to install a pedestrian crossing on the High Street. And I think we're going to have quite a lot to say about this. Who would like to start? Councillor Leslie Fage.
I'm in favour of a zebra crossing. I just want to clarify, does the lollipop lady, when required, still work during the school times? Does she still operate down there? Obviously not now because of what's going on, but when schools are up and running, and would it have a jeopardy on her job? Because she used to operate just after Dells Lane, crossing into London Road, and she was valuable there as well.
Yes.
I have no idea about the position of the lollipop lady. I don't know whether any of these Central Beds councillors do, but this is a separate crossing and presumably would not have a lollipop lady there, because school children going to Lawnside would still be using the other crossing, which is more convenient from the housing estates. That would be my thought anyway. Who else would like to speak? Councillor Woodhead.
Hi, yeah, I just want to say I'm in favour of the proposal. I think actually the zebra crossing that's further up by Dells Lane should also be retained as well, because of the reasons I think you've just outlined about students going back and forth between Lawnside and maybe even from the other end of town to Biggleswade Academy as well. So I think that's important, and possibly even Stratton going further over to that part of town. I think it's also intuitive for people coming from the station, walking on Back Lane through the rear of the station to go to other parts of town and having a safer crossing there. I note that the speed limit is 20 on there already. So I think if people are adhering to the speed limit anyway, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. I know that has been raised before by other people, but it is already 20. I mean, maybe it might be worth looking at some possible traffic calming measures in conjunction with this on the southbound bit as it comes around the corner, which, you know, it is a little bit of a blind bend, I suppose, if we were concerned about that. But otherwise, I think it's a good suggestion. And I think it will be interesting to see how it also links up with option 4 or 5 in the train interchange debate later as well, and make sure it all links together. But we can talk about that later, but I think it's a good idea.
Councillor Ramsey.
Further to what Councillor Leslie Fage and Jonathan Woodhead have just said, I'm concerned, is this crossing intended to replace the one at the junction of Dells Lane and London Road?
No, this is a separate crossing that's been being talked about for a long while. And I think there are issues with this crossing, but I'll come to that in a moment.
That's fine, because the existing crossing at the junction of London Road is not only used for school children, it's also used to access the library and the doctor's surgery from all the residents up Dells Lane and in that area. So it's well used. Thank you very much.
Councillor Strawn.
Yes, I've got some concerns about the crossing, the sighting of it. I think it's all right, but certainly as a zebra crossing, I have grave reservations about drivers paying attention to it. We've heard reference to the Dells Lane crossing near Dells Lane. The number of times I've tried to cross there and traffic has totally ignored the crossing is beyond belief. And I think that just a zebra crossing could be very dangerous. I think it would be far better if it was a pelican crossing with lights, because I think people would pay more attention to that. And I think they're far more likely to stop. With just a zebra crossing, particularly with it being on an angle of a bend, I fear that crossing from the southern side to the northern side, there could be accidents. Not only is the one in London Road by Dells Lane ignored, but anybody who's walked down Shortmead Street, the zebra crossing near Ivell Gardens Junction, over the years, a number of times traffic just ignores that and goes flying through. It's dangerous. So I don't think a zebra crossing is sufficient. I think it should be a pelican crossing. Further, when one looks at the description of where it actually is, saying it's approximately 12 metres northwest of the northern boundary of number 2 London Road. If you look at the plan, it is right adjoining the boundary of 2 London Road. So I don't think that actually description is correct, and possibly that notice could be invalid because of that description. But I don't think a zebra crossing is appropriate as such. I think it should be something more formal, such as a pelican crossing.
Before I ask other councillors to speak, could I add a bit of background to this? Because we've been talking about a crossing at this top end of the high street for a long while. We've always asked for a pelican crossing, but highways are very reluctant to put a pelican crossing in. The latest I've heard is that they think there'll be too much of a backup of traffic. But to me, if somebody is crossing the road, they're crossing the road and the traffic's going to stop and there will be a backup. So I don't understand the argument against a pelican crossing. And I think what's just been said is quite right. It would be much safer. And if the light was on the northern side of the crossing as well as on the southern side, traffic coming down London Road would have much more of a chance to see it before they got close to it. So I think that there's an issue there and that we should be pushing for a pelican crossing. The other thing on the plans that we have in front of us, there are 3 lots of pavement build-outs, and I don't know whether people have looked at this, but the first one I'd mention is a pavement build-out by the Red Lion. Now, if that build-out's put in place, and I can't understand why that needs to be part of a plan for this crossing, but if that build-out is put in place, then you won't be able to have 2 cars side by side, and you very often get one car wanting to turn right and one wanting to turn left, and it's going to be a further hold up if they build the pavement out there. And it's not necessary for pedestrians crossing because there's a traffic island in the middle of the balk anyway. There's another build out at the end of Back Street. Now that's already quite tight. The whole issue at the end of Back Street worries me because the cycle lane, which is the contraflow cycle lane along Back Street, is actually on the footpath there anyway. And that's never seemed like a good idea to me, but that's not really an issue for this crossing. But the other thing is there is a build out on the south side of the crossing itself. And all I'd say is our high street, it's our only really good route through the town. The other 3 railway bridges all have difficulties. And also, our high street is the official highways agency diversion for the A1 when there's an issue on the bypass. So therefore, what we're doing is narrowing the road just on a bend where we might have plasmor lorries, all sorts of other lorries trying to cross. And it just seems unnecessary to me. Why does there need to be a build out? And there certainly doesn't need to be a build out if there's a pelican crossing, because you don't need people to be able to come out far enough to try and see round the bend. So I think we should be pushing for a pelican crossing and pushing to not have any of the build outs because they're unnecessary. Anyway, I've said my piece. I think Councillor Alban wants to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, I would much prefer a pelican crossing to be there, but I think we need to bear in mind that people use that part of the road to cross in any case. So anything that improves the safety of people crossing that road is better than nothing. There are large numbers of people that use that, especially when they've come from the station So you can see when the trains come in by the number of people actually crossing the road there. So it is used currently, it is dangerous, and it needs to be made safer. I agree that a pelican crossing would be better, but I think anything is better than nothing there.
Thank you. Councillor Bond?
This proposal came to the last traffic management a couple of weeks ago, and that's when I first heard about it, and Councillor Watkins was in a similar situation. It's because we actually hadn't received a notification about the consultation. That's why it's been consulted on again, because it was actually deferred from the meeting for another cycle. Councillor Watkins and I have been working closely with officers, and we actually have a meeting actually arranged, a call arranged to actually discuss our concerns. What's very clear is the build out is very different. The actual crossing is now in a different position to when it came about 2 years ago to Town Council. Town Council did express its own opinion at the time that they prefer the Pelican Crossing. So this needs to be discussed. Our concerns really have to be about the build out, and as the Mayor said earlier, this is the A1. This is basically the A1, the old A1, which is also, when the A1's closed, it becomes the A1. So to reduce it at certain distances is not ideal. This could well be due to the factors that examples like when we've had crossings in Shortmead Street. There's been build out because apparently there's some regulations regarding the lengths of crossings. So I'm sure Councillor Watkins and myself will actually get the full detail when we have a conversation very soon with officers. But personally, I'm against its current form. But we do need a crossing, and I would like us to actually go back and actually considerations, amendments to it. But as to the argument of a zebra crossing or pelican crossing, I'm prepared to actually leave that to a discussion with officers and to be convinced one way or another.
I've got Councillor Knight, Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Pullinger. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. So firstly, I'd like to support this crossing, and having crossed that road many times, for me at least, it appears to be in the natural place. Maybe I'm in a minority here. My preference is for a zebra crossing as proposed. I think pelican crossings often cause additional delays by stopping traffic for longer or when pedestrians have already passed. Of course, caution is still needed, and there needs to be effective enforcement of the speed limit. I agree the build outs are worrying, so I'd be very content to question those. They don't seem appropriate to me.
Councillor Ramsey, then Councillor Pullinger.
I'm concerned about these build outs because of the proximity of the ambulance station and the fire station, because they need to go through at speed. And if you're going to reduce the road like that, I can't understand why they've done the build outs, but that is one of my concerns, is the emergency vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger. Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, sorry, I was just coming off mute. So I also have used this route a number of times, and that is, I think, the natural crossing place that I've certainly used on a number of occasions on the way to the station. Like Councillor Knight, I would favour a zebra crossing as well, essentially for the reasons he says. I think that it would cause unnecessary delays to traffic in an area that potentially could become more congested in the future with future development as well. Of course, safety of pedestrians is of main concern here, but this is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and if that is enforced, then there shouldn't be a significant issue with this being a zebra crossing. As for the build outs, I can see particularly the one on the south side of the crossing itself. I can see the advantage of that in terms of giving greater visibility to the pedestrians using the crossing. In terms of narrowing the width, I think that it's a single carriageway road, whichever way you look at it. So I don't necessarily think it would have a significant impact in terms of causing any issues with that. And I'd essentially take advice from the officers and the experts, I guess, on that point. But yeah, so essentially I would support the proposal as being consulted on.
Councillor North.
Yeah, just a point of clarification on the, as far as I can see, this question of build outs, the only build out is just to the south of the, or if it is the south, whatever, anyway, of the zebra crossing itself. But outside the Red Lion is not a build out, it's resurfacing, isn't it?
There's a build out as well, and a build out at the end of Back Street, if you look at the plans.
Is it? Oh, well, it's not that, the sort of pale purplish blue. Oh yes, there is, right, you're right, but only a very small bit. But I think the one to the south of the zebra crossing is probably to make the pavement wider, because it is very narrow there, which does seem reasonable, although it makes the carriageway narrower, obviously.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
Comment.
I think, excuse me, I think the problem with the build-outs is that they are there to slow the cars down as they're turning. I've crossed across from the Red Lion to the Back Street entrance millions of times, and basically the cars don't slow down, don't see people, they just try and cut the corner. So it's meant to slow them down on the corner as well. The strange thing I see is that there's in the balk, there's a 20 and a 30, and I know the 30 is going away, but it makes sense for me to put that to be 20 as well, but it's just a small point. But then on the point of traffic, it does get very busy, or used to get very busy before the situation recently, especially at peak times, Saturdays, Fridays. And there's always a problem of turning right there. People coming out of the town want to turn into Back Street, and there's just not room for two cars to turn most of the time. And then if you've got the build outs and the narrowing, it's going to be more difficult. So I think to minimize the traffic jams, you're going to have to say it's got to be a zebra crossing, otherwise you're going to, there's three crossings very close to each other, and they'll slow everything down. But as Mark Knight says, I'd err on the side of safety and put the crossing in, but put the minimum we have to. I've crossed there a lot of times, and it is worthwhile putting a crossing there. That's all.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak? No. Okay. So I think we've got various issues here where council isn't agreed on the various issues. So we've got the issue of whether it's a pelican or a zebra. We've got the issue of the build outs. Something that hasn't been mentioned, but there are going to be problems with deliveries to shops on that corner anyway, because that shop is going to be reopened on that corner, but that's not particularly relevant for this. And we've had the issue of emergency vehicles, if there are build outs, because we were told that the emergency vehicles preferred to go down the high street a lot of the time because of getting over the Crab Lane Bridge. So we'll see. So first of all, can I have all those in favour of a pelican crossing showing? And then I'll ask about a zebra crossing. So that's 4 of us want a pelican crossing. All those in favour of a zebra crossing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people showing, 6 people. Okay, so a zebra crossing it is then. And what about the build outs? Those in favour of build outs, please. That's 6. All those who don't want build outs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on me is 6 and Leslie is 7. So actually it's no build outs. So what we're agreeing is a zebra crossing, but no build outs. Have I forgotten any other issues that we need to give a response on, colleagues? And I'm sorry, Councillor Fage.
One very minor thing at the end, but if we are going to suggest a zebra crossing, the last time we had a new zebra crossing in Biggleswade was on Shortmead Street back in December 2018. and the power supply from UK Power Networks didn't come through till about 4 months after the crossing was in place. If we are going to have a new crossing here, it needs to be done all in one go. We can't have a situation where you have a new crossing appear without a sufficient signal that that crossing is there. So maybe that's just something to note. I'm not saying that necessarily forms part of the response, but I do think that's important.
So, sorry, Councillor Foster, Mark Foster.
I just think we need to be mindful of that. If we recommend that we go for a zebra crossing with no build outs, then that's essentially a redesign of the crossing, and that might then cause us issues as well in terms of the width of the road and the I have concerns in the same way others do. But I think if I remember correctly, previous design of this had a central reservation which sort of offset the width. So I think we just need to be mindful of the fact that if we proposing something different, it may have to be a complete redesign.
Yes, and that may be what needs to happen, because we need to get this crossing right. It is essential. So the response is that we would like a zebra crossing but without build outs, and that we have concerns about the power supply being in place. And also we'd like to remind highways officers that it is the A1 diversion, so it needs to be designed with that in mind, because we do have that used several times a year. Is everybody okay with that as a summary?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm on to 9B, which is the train station access. We've lost Councillor Bond at the moment. I think he must have had trouble with his IT. So he and I were at the meeting where options for the bridge were looked at. And I would just like to say something in his absence about the two drawings that you've got in front of you, because the actual preferred option by everybody in the meeting that Richard Fuller chaired, our MP, the station access meeting, the actual preferred option was option 4, which is with the access from the end of the existing bridge next to the booking office. Now, the reason that the other access was is also being put forward at the moment is that Julian Vaughan, who chairs the Biggleswade Rail User Group, felt there was an issue with the level of land where the transport interchange is. Now, the orangey hatched area to the south of the blue car park is where the new transport interchange will be, which is being paid for by the Housing Infrastructure Fund. And Julian Vaughan feels that the level of the land is quite a lot lower than the car park, and he was concerned about how disabled people were going to be able to get to the booking office and then to the bridge. But if you look at this design here, we'd be doing away with the bike racks and the access would be there. So there would still be the problem of the land issues. And it seems to me as an individual that the sensible thing would be to make sure that the land level is right for the transport interchange. The other issue about the two designs here, and they are quite similar in costing, because that's important, because Network Rail, the next stage is for Network Rail to write up the options appraisal and then to apply to the Department for Transport for the funding for this. So it's important that these two are about the same funding, because one of the options that was put forward was a couple of £1 million more, which wouldn't have got through. But the main issue about the bridges themselves is the gradient of the bridges. And for people in a wheelchair, the longer bridge from beside the booking office is a shallower gradient than the access from where the current bike racks are. So that's the background to this. So at the moment, the decision was to take forward option 4, unless there proves to be an insurmountable problem with the transport interchange. So I was a bit surprised when Network Rail sent out both designs, but that's what happened at the meeting. And I'm now open to councillor comments, and Councillor Knight wishes to speak. And can I just add, Councillor Knight, before you speak, to just confirm that the current bridge will be left in place, so there will be 2 accesses onto each platform. And what Network Rail are proposing is that there will be sliding gates at the top of the existing steps, so that the station can be made secure when there's no rail traffic, because we do have problems with young people sometimes, and not so young people on the platforms. Councillor Knight, sorry.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the intro. So obviously looking at the plans that we have received, which I think are quite hard to read. I don't know whether other members have had access to additional information. I think there are 4 considerations. Obviously, the provision of step-free access to a range of people who need it. As Mr. Soden said at the beginning, I think provision for access to and from the platforms from both the east and the west side of the station, that is incredibly important. Potentially increasing capacity for travellers disembarking trains at peak times. So for anyone who travels back from London, there are frequently queues for the steps when a 12-car train arrives. So doubling the number of steps would be an incredibly positive move, particularly as the town continues to grow. And of course, also the quality and aesthetic design and experience, given the historical buildings. And I think it's really difficult to assess those from the plans, but I would imagine that would be something we could assess at a later stage. So I did share these plans on Facebook and tried to get some feedback. And of the options provided, my feeling was that option 5, and in fact most of the responses I got seemed to suggest option 5, because it appears that it would remove 1 pinch point for passengers. So at the moment, the sort of area where the external ticket machines are can get quite crowded. And it looked like option 5, and not really appreciating the gradient issue, would potentially remove that pinch point and therefore help to increase capacity more than option 4. You mentioned the plan is for the bridge to stay there. So each of the plans seems to have 4 sub-options labelled A to D. Obviously, looking at that in isolation, that seems to suggest that the existing bridge could be closed. And there's a note there that it's not currently a public right-of-way. And that would be extremely concerning, because the new bridge wouldn't provide any access to the east. And as was mentioned, many people use that bridge daily, either to access the trains or just to cross the town. So I think my proposal would be that council supports option 5, but with the condition that option A is selected in relation to maintaining the footbridge. And I would also suggest that we write to CBC asking them to investigate whether the existing bridge would be eligible to be upgraded to a public right-of-way, to ensure that would be retained indefinitely, please.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Knight's proposal? Councillor Fage, Grant Fage. Okay, well, to answer some of your questions, both options specifically take the footbridge to the south of the listed station building. And in fact, one of the problems with the existing bridge is that you can't have a long enough access there without going into and knocking down part of that listed building. You're right that there are options for the footbridge, but the meeting was quite clear that it would be the option A. So that was what was decided. The issue about the bottleneck by the booking office, the other issue, of course, is that disabled people will probably need to use the booking office in the same way, unless they're regular commuters. Because what Mr. Vaughan was saying was, well, if you use option 5, they can go straight from a bus or the disabled parking bays at that end of the car park, because they'll all be disabled parking bays adjacent to the transport interchange. Mr. Vaughan was saying they could go straight onto the bridge. Well, they could if they don't need tickets.
Can I just come back on that very quickly?
Yes.
So I'm just imagining, obviously people buy paper tickets today. In the lifetime of this bridge, I would imagine in the next few years, paper tickets and the need to visit a ticket office is quite likely to be a thing of the past. So maybe that's only a consideration for the next 5 years, which whilst is important, maybe the bridge will be there for 50, 100 years.
well, I know how keen you are on high tech, but there are other reasons for visiting the booking office. You sometimes don't quite know what train and what ticket you want and all the rest of it. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So first point I'd like to make is looking at the plans. I personally preferred the design for 4, although I can, from some of the points that Councillor Knight made, I can see some of the advantages of option 5 as well. My concerns really come down to the existing footbridge, and while I appreciate that the agreement made was to retain the footbridge and to put the gates at the top, that doesn't provide a guarantee that those gates will remain open for use in the longer term. I do know other stations that Network Rail have where they've got public rights of way in similar ways over them, and they've got the gates at the top that are only used as emergency egress and not routinely. And also it comes to the fact that in the future, if the Network Rail choose to want to put barriers in, for example, to restrict access to ticket holders only to the station itself, they wouldn't be able to do that from those access points. Which leads me to the other point, which is I have heard, and I don't know the full history of this, but that there were some issues regarding the space between the stairs and the edge of the platform at the current bridge, which are not in line, I believe, are not in line with current requirements, and therefore there may be a driver for them at some point to remove those stairs for that reason, even if they left the existing bridge in for as a right of way from the east side, and that would significantly increase the distance that people had to travel across 2 bridges effectively to reach platforms 1 and 2. So I guess my query was, and you may know the answer to this, as to why the bridge wasn't extended over to the new bridge isn't extended over to the east side as well to connect to the footpath that's on that side.
Okay, well, there are 2 issues there. First of all, the issue with the width of the platform where the existing stairs are was more to do with having a lift there and people coming out of the lift. So there was no indication from Network Rail officers or GTR people who were there that there would be any problem with continuing to use the existing staircase. Okay. There was the option of putting the bridge right across to the footpath, but that was the option that was another couple of million, and it was highly unlikely that the DFT would agree to that when there was a perfectly viable option at less money. And that was what was discussed at the meeting. And all I can say is that if option 4, which is the preferred option of the rail access meeting and the option that's going to be put forward in the option appraisal, if that's the one that's used, there is access from the east and the west to that one quite easily. It's not that much further. It's not like going all the way round to where the access to option 5 would be. I hope that helps. I'm just telling you what was discussed at I've been to 2 meetings with this rail access group now, and there's been an awful lot of discussion of a lot of these points. Councillor Sorry. So
I was just going to come back. I think we have a proposal that's been seconded from Councillor Knight to support option 5.
Yes.
If that's the case, I would be happy to put forward an amendment to allow us to vote on it, that we support option 4 actually. So
well, we can't have an amendment that's the opposite. But what we can have
the option. Well, I think it's we could say we support neither, which I think would be the. If we don't support 5, we don't automatically support 4, do we? So that's why.
No, but we can have another vote after that. It depends what happens. If option 5 is supported by council, then that's it. If option 5 isn't supported by council, then we can have another motion on the table once option 5 has been discussed. So I've still got people wishing to speak. I've got Councillor Grantfage and then Councillor Woodhead. Councillor Fage.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You've also got Councillor Alban as well who'd like to speak.
Thank you. Sorry.
Even though he had his hand up before. So option 5. Sorry, David. Option 5. The reason I think this is quite useful is, well, not quite useful, but the problem I have with option 4 is, so I use the trains occasionally when they run and when I'm going to work in London, and it is the queues outside the ticket office and the ticket machines on a Monday morning, on a Tuesday morning, and most mornings it can get very congested there. And if that's going to be one of the key access points to get to the far south side of the platform, be that for disabled people or for anybody, creating more congestion around those ticket machines is not particularly sensible. The second thing I would say, we shouldn't be thinking too much, in my view, about the location of a bridge relative to where the ticket machines currently are. I mean, ticket machines are a lot less expensive than a bridge. If they want to be moved at some point in the future, they're probably going to move. You know, with the whole transport interchange hub, who knows what that will bring. If you look at what they have in Hitchin, for example, they have 4 or 5 ticket machines outside where the buses come in, and that would make sense, right? If it's a hub, you should be able to get your tickets relatively there. So that's sort of a secondary consideration for me, in my view. The other thing I would like to raise actually is about crime, and this is not a minor thing in the train station. There are pretty dangerous people who lurk around those alleyways in the dark corners off the sides of those bridges, looking to mug people, and we've all heard of incidents of it. It's sort of a secondary point, but the more ways out of the station there are, potentially into a relatively well-lit car park and future transport interchange hub, I know I would feel safer coming out into that kind of area than I would onto a bridge where people could literally trap me either side. So that's why I'm minded to support option 5. I don't think we should put the cart before the horse in thinking about where the ticket machines currently are. I recognise the issue around the gradient for disabled people, but I think this is a big improvement on what we've currently got, and option 4 could create some further problems and exacerbate those which already exist, which is why I seconded Councillor Knight's proposal.
Okay, could I just remind Council that we still have, and it will still happen, the money that we were promised through GTR, and there will be extra ticket machines as was asked for, and we've discussed that at Council before, and it was confirmed at the last rail user meeting that that is still going ahead, but we don't have a timescale for when they'll be put in. Councillor Woodhead, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you. I think, I think a few of the points have already been made, but thank you for touching on the passenger benefit fund, which is, I think, the thing you're referring to about additional funding from the delays last year, and GTR were going to spend money on different things. Like Councillor Fage, I think the ticket machines could be moved. I think there could be some on the platforms and all the rest of it. So let's not get too hung up on that. I mean, I think I'm largely in favour of option 4, purely because for those coming from the north and east of the town, it's just a bit easier to loop round the back of the ticket office than go all the way around to the front where the interchange might be. Notwithstanding the valid points about crime, but actually there might be other good reasons why people go to a ticket office. I mean, in my mind, there are lots of people who still buy tickets on the machine, which is quite strange in this day and age, but it's been happening. But actually, if you're a disabled person, you need assistance, you may need to go into the ticket office. If you're a young parent with a pushchair as well, you might be infirm, not necessarily in a wheelchair, but could be, with a stick. There could be a whole load of reasons why you might need assistance, and that's the more obvious place to go and get it. And secondly, if the gradient is more gentle at that point as well, you will also feel safer going down onto the bridge and then onto the platform. So I think the gradient is a key factor in that as well. So, and it shouldn't be dismissed. So I think for that reason, I think option 4 is preferable, although neither are optimum. But I think 4 slightly gets it than 5 for me. So I think that's they were really the only points I wanted to make.
Okay, Councillor Alban, you've been very patient. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, my preference is for option 4. I think as has just been said, it's important that the booking office is nearer the start of the bridge, because there are, as we just heard, many reasons why people would want to go to the booking office. Ticket machines may be relocated and may not even exist in the future, as Councillor Knight pointed out. But that's where the booking office is, so I think that's the best start for the bridge. And option 5, I do not like the idea of the cycle parking being removed with no obvious place to relocate it. I don't know where it would go. The comment is that stakeholders will be consulted, which sounds kind of ominous to me. So yeah, there is no obvious place to put the cycle park in once it's been removed, if this option is taken. So my preference is for option 4. But as far as the existing bridge is concerned, I think we do need to be reassured that it is going to be retained, and step access from there as well. I'm sure there are many people who leave it to the last minute to get the train, and the quicker you can get onto the platform, the better. So yeah, I'm against option 5, but I'm pro option 4.
Thank you. And I've got Councillor Ramsey signalling.
I just wanted to talk a bit about the ticket office, because ticket machines are fine if you know exactly where you're going and at what time and on what day. But if you go into the ticket office and you explain your situation and the journey you want to make, you get a lot of very valuable advice about the type of ticket to buy, when would be the best time to go, etc., etc. So machines, I say, have their place, but I don't think they should replace human beings that can give you advice. And the second thing is, I share the concerns that the cycle racks are going to apparently disappear into thin air. I don't think that's at all advisable, and I really would like to go for option 4. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Is that Councillor Knight wishing to speak again? Sorry. And
Thanks.
then
Yeah, I think councillors and members have made some really good points. I just nothing in option 5 precludes people visiting the ticket office. I wonder, in terms of my original proposal, whether it would be helpful to separate out voting on the options 4 and 5 versus the suggestion I made to request as a condition for either that option A is selected to retain the existing bridge and access to the platform. Noting that the current steps to the platform do appear somewhat corroded, so I do worry that in the future they could be removed. So I wonder if separating the votes may help.
So are you proposing that we vote first on whether we want option 5 or not, and we vote separately on retaining the bridge? And you suggested in your proposal that we should keep the public right of way.
That would be my revised proposal, that we vote separately on options 4 or 5, and then we vote on option A with the investigation into potentially making it a public right of way. Maybe that would be a quicker path.
Thank you. Are you content with that, Councillor Fage? You seconded it. Yes, thank you. Do I have anybody else wanting to speak?
Councillor North.
Sorry, Councillor North. Thank you. Councillor North, yes, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment, really picking up something Councillor Olban said about getting reassurances about the existing bridge, and Councillor Knight has alluded to this, because I seem to remember one of these meetings that you're talking about that I went to when I was the mayor a couple of years ago, and these things do drag on, as we all know, but there were some mutterings there from Network Rail people about the existing bridge and the fact that it's what, over 100 years old, probably, or not far short of 100 years old anyway, largely made of steel, and there are some issues about corrosion. And I mean, I think I can see a situation where, let's say in a couple of years' time, the notice they won't remove it, but they'll simply close it for public safety. Say this is unsafe now, and we're closing the bridge, and then nothing more is ever heard of it. So I think it would be good if we could possibly try and get some maybe it's a bit late now, but get some sort of reassurance about it, that they will keep it open and keep it in proper working order, keep it in safe condition.
Well,
Maybe it's too late to do that now.
if Councillor Knight's happy, we could add that to keeping the existing bridge and step access and making sure it's maintained as necessary.
Of course, yes.
And then and also looking into making it a public right of way. I think that would cover all the issues that colleagues have made on that one. Okay, and Councillor Knight's happy with that, and I think Councillor Fage is as well. Okay, anything else, colleagues? Councillor Alban?
Yeah, just I don't think it's quite 100 years old, that bridge, because I can remember the one that came before it. And I'm not that old.
Give it a history lesson.
Right. On that note, the first proposal that we're voting on then is the first part of Councillor Knight's proposal, and that is to prefer option 5. All those in favour of option 5, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those not in favour of option 5. All those against option 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So option 5 is lost. Before we move on to a possible another proposal on that, we now have the proposal to make the comment to Network Rail that we something stronger than we wish, but we want the existing bridge to be kept and the step access from the bridge, and that we want it to be maintained as necessary. And then we want to investigate making it a formal public right of way. And Councillor Strawn, are you?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor. Surely we should now put option 4 as the preferred option, because while we rejected option 5, we didn't actually appoint option 4 as our favoured option.
No, I was coming to that because I'm doing the second part of Councillor Knight's original proposal first.
Sorry.
I hadn't forgotten, but thank you, because I do forget things. Okay, so without repeating it all again, all those in favour of the existing bridge being maintained and right of way, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Pullinger.
So can I propose that we support option 4, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favour of option 4, please. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
We appear to have lost the mayor.
Yeah.
The mayor's still there.
Can you hear us, Madam Mayor? We can't. You seem to have frozen.
Looks like everyone else is still here.
Yeah.
It was the threat of having to count to 8 that did it.
I can't understand. I dropped out earlier. The joys of the internet.
Well, perhaps we could ask Councillor Foster to take over as deputy for a few moments, just to see through this vote at least.
Yeah, but the mayor has a right to vote.
Right.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm back. I don't know what happened there, but all of a sudden you totally froze. What I was saying was that was 10-4 option 4. Those against option 4, please. No, okay. Does anybody wish to abstain? 2, I think, abstaining. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. I'm now moving on to the future of the market. We have on our order paper this request from NABMA, which I find a bit odd that why we should write to the local MP, because as a council who run the market, there's no question that we would not run the market. And the fact that there's only one stall at the moment is down to the stall holder's preference, plus the rules of the lockdown. So I don't know what colleagues think about this, but I was a bit surprised. Comments, please. Councillor Fage, Grant Fage.
Yeah, it wasn't really clear to me from what's written what NABMA are saying the actual problem is. I mean, if we talk about our own experience from Biggleswade, we were prepared to help the market to continue through this period, particularly on the grounds of helping to maintain food supply, as the bread stall is currently doing. But even when I was reading the paper today, the agenda, I see no indication as to what NABMA are saying is the actual problem, other than, you know, there's a risk that the markets will struggle to reopen. I mean, that's possibly true, but what do they actually want the government to do about it, and what's the problem with the scheme that the Chancellor has put in place that they want our MP to lobby to improve? That was not clear to me from what was written. So I mean, I propose that we don't write, unfortunately, because I don't think we'd know what to say.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that proposal not to write? Councillor Sorry, Councillor Woodhead.
It's not so much a kind of seconder, but could we just go back to NABMA and just ask them to clarify what it is they're asking? I mean, that rather than a case of not writing or writing, it's just saying, well, actually, what is it you're wanting from us? I mean, of course, we support the markets. You know, it's I would hope that goes without saying. And obviously, as Councillor Grant-Fage has said, we've tried to facilitate that as best we can. But it's something I think we would want to support, of course, the markets, but maybe we should just ask if town clerk could go back to them and say, well, couldn't you give us some more detail, or what is it you're actually asking? And then we can maybe take a view on it. But it does seem a bit vague at the moment.
Okay, well, we do have a proposal on the table, and I was asking for a seconder. Are you seconding,
I'll
Councillor?
remove that and replace it with
sorry, just a minute. I've got a proposal. Are you wishing to change your proposal now, Councillor?
Yeah, that's okay. Councillor Woodhead's suggestion is fair to if we write back to NABMA just asking them to clarify what they want us to say, nothing more than that. But the point is, I don't think we're in a position to write to our MP at the moment based on the information that they've provided.
So are you withdrawing your proposal?
Yes, please. Oh, so sorry, I'll modify it. I'll modify the proposal to write to NABMA to just ask them to clarify what they want us to say to our MP.
Do I have a seconder for that proposal, please? Councillor Pullinger.
Before I do formally second it, though, Madam Mayor, I believe when Councillor Fage was making his original proposal, the town clerk did have his hand raised. So I just wanted to confirm that he didn't have anything to add before I second it that might change our view.
Did you wish to speak, Mr. Clark?
Yes, I would, Madam Mayor, if I may. I mean, well, what I've done here is basically to précis a longer piece of documentation from NABMA. What they're seeking essentially is support for sort of national, it's a lobbyist position, national campaign to ensure that markets generally survive the current COVID-19 crisis, because I think they are fearful that perhaps not in Biggleswade, where the market may well come back and recover, and I don't think there's any intention that the market should be closed. But on the other hand, I think there is concern across the country, and they're just looking for moral support more than anything else. But they haven't really specified, I would say, as members have pointed out, they haven't specified how this is to be achieved and what sort of support should be required. As I say, it's basically a lobbying request to see if they can get, you know, as many councils who are market authorities to support their position. But that's really what it's all about.
Okay, but their position isn't clear because at the moment, surely it's in the hands of the stallholders whether they come back or not. Sorry, Councillor Pullinger, are you still seconding?
Yes, so on that basis, I would second the proposal that we should write to NABMA to essentially say, while we're sympathetic to what they're saying, we don't have enough information from them in terms of what they are actually wanting us to propose, rather than just expressing concern, and that we would want to have more information in order to write to our MP.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak on that? No? Right, well, we have the proposal that we need to go back to NABMA and ask them for more information about what exactly they're concerned about and what they want us to put into any letter to the MP. All those in favour, please. I think that's 10 or 11. In fact, I think that's unanimous. Yes, sorry, unanimous. Right, land north of Biggleswade. We've been asked by Hallam Land for a virtual meeting about the development brief as part of their round of consultation that they're now embarking on, virtual consultation, because they can't do the ordinary public consultation they would. And I think they've got a public webinar this coming Monday that people can sign up for. Comments, please. Councillor Fage, Grant Fage.
Thank you for the introduction, Madam Mayor. I think maybe if I could give a little bit of background to fellow councillors on this, because there has been quite a bit of movement which council needs to be updated on, and ultimately a decision to be made. So over the last few months, we saw, when was it, end of March, we sent off the technical audit, which we completed on their transport assessment. We sent that to Central Beds. Central Beds Highways came back and they said, we can only consider this if it's a public document. So to be clear, the technical audit is now public. Central Beds officers have seen it, and we anticipate Hallam have as well. Well, we've been clear that they can forward it on to Hallam. So that is now considered. We have, we're pretty clear that Hallam are probably going to try to have a pretty quick consultation if they can. I think Councillor Bond, I've spoken to him and he indicated that, you know, we could see this at DMC potentially in June. So that's probably the timeline that we're working to here. In terms of where we go from here, I mean, my view, for what it's worth, is we have spent money getting this technical audit in place. It is good. We know it's good. We know the Central Beds officers are interested in it. What we need to do is make sure that we push it and we get it to a position whereby it is really being considered and that we're using the arguments which are made in it as effectively as we can. Just to be clear, we have, I understand Councillor Watkins is trying to find time in the diary with senior highways officers who are dealing with this application, and the transport consultant has indicated that he is prepared to join that meeting to have a professional discussion with the Central Beds officers about the content of the technical audit and Hallam's transport assessment. So that's very positive. I'd therefore like to make a proposal, because it's clear that Hallam would like to meet with us, presumably so that they can call that part of their consultation. I think we should be quite specific about what we want in terms of that discussion and what we want from that consultation. So if I think about the way that we worked, the opportunity we gave to UK Regeneration and Land East of Biggleswade, we asked them to come to a formal meeting of council, which was minuted, to come and present to us in a public forum. My view is that we should offer Hallam that same opportunity, and they can count that towards their consultation if they so wish. So that's the first part of the proposal. The second part of the proposal is we need to try to push this technical audit document, and specifically it would be beneficial if we understand what Hallam's position is on it. We know they're concerned about it, but the more information that we can obtain for what arguments they're going to make in order to try to rebut the technical audit, the better, because we can potentially take that information and help it to inform what our response will then be. So, I mean, I'd like to propose that on top of that, we ask Hallam for a private meeting to discuss specifically the contents of the technical audit and their transport assessment, and really get into the detail specifically about those documents. They're well aware that we object to this application. They're well aware that we're going to do everything that we can to highlight what we consider to be inconsistencies in their document and inaccuracies, and the problems that they will create for the road network, particularly in the north of the town. I think we need to understand exactly what they think of it. And so that is a two-part proposal. One, for a public meeting to town council that can be via Zoom if necessary, to present in the same way that UKR did. And second, a proposal for a private meeting, potentially with a selection of councillors who are close to the detail, to meet with Hallam to go through the technical audit. Obviously, then there will be a feedback loop to councillors once, if that meeting then goes ahead. So that's my proposal.
Thank you. So that's a two-part proposal. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. I have a seconder. Yeah. Comments, please, colleagues. Does anybody wish to say anything? Okay, well, I'm not getting any indications. So a two-part proposal that we, Councillor Pullinger.
Oh, I think Councillor Foster was first, actually, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I missed both of you. Councillor Foster.
Okay, yeah, I'm not in favour of private meetings at all. I think we should invite Hallam along to a public council meeting where councillors should put their points to them, question them, make our feelings known, which they already know. I should also like it so that the public can do the same thing. I'm not in favour of a private meeting at all.
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So I think just on to Councillor Foster's point, are we going to take firstly both parts together or separately in terms of voting? Because I'm in favour completely of the first part of the proposal around the public meeting. I do have some concerns around the private meeting, and I'm not. I'm open to persuasion either way, really. But my concern around the private meeting is that how Hallam might use that meeting to get more insight from us, other than what's necessarily written, just what's written in the document. I think absolutely we should use Councillor Watkins and speaking with the officers with our transport consultant to make sure that we give the absolute best representation of our technical audit to the officers at Central Beds. I don't see why we should essentially have a meeting with Hallam to provide them that same insight into our views on the technical audit beyond what's necessarily written within the text itself.
I think Councillor Fage's point was we want more insight into how they might be going to rebut it rather than giving them more insight.
Yeah, I agree, but in order to get that, we need to tell them what we're going to say to the development committee.
They already have that in our assessment. But anyway, Councillor Strawn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree that if we're going to have a meeting, it must be in public. It was agreed before the lockdown that we would invite Hallam along to a public meeting, which I think they'd accepted, but then it got stopped as I think the pandemic started to hit. I'm against the private meeting with them to go through the technical audit. We have got to be transparent as a council. If we have a private meeting with them, it will not be good. The public are entitled to see what's being suggested. I think we should have the public available for the meeting with the full council in the normal way. I'm totally against the private meeting to go through the transport documentation. I think it was not transparent, and we're open to criticism if we do so.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Bond. Councillor Bond.
I've listened to what colleagues have been saying about this, and I can recall back to when Town Council met Hallam before. What I would say in this situation is we invited Hallam to speak to Town Council, and when it was going to be a public meeting, they declined and actually withdrew. That's actually what happened last time. And then, of course, COVID-19 picked in. But in reality, they actually withdrew. They actually didn't want a public meeting. I feel that we should actually have a public meeting in this situation, and actually so that there can be a very clear dialogue, because I could be wrong, but I got the impression last time that the dialogue was with Town Council was to tick a box rather than to actually listen to what Town Council said. If you review what actually was presented to DMC in the documents for the development brief, I don't think they actually listened to what the Town Council said. So my personal viewpoint would be to actually go for a public meeting, a Town Council meeting with the public being present, well, but virtually, and so that we can actually be very clear as to what questions are being asked and what answers we give as a Town Council. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Well, I have a two-part proposal at the moment, both inviting Hallam to a Town Council meeting and then agreeing to the private meeting which Hallam have asked for to discuss the technical audit. Councillor Fage.
Can we take them separately?
I'm happy to do that. Okay, so first of all then, all those in favour of inviting Hallam to a future Town Council meeting? I think that's unanimous. Thank you. All those in favour of a private meeting with Hallam to discuss things in more detail, please show. I think that's 3 of us. So all those against, please show. I think that's 8, so that's lost. So we'll invite them to a future Town Council meeting. That will stretch our technology even further, won't it? We'll see how that goes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to item 10, which is the accounts. Councillor Ramsey, did you wish to say anything about this, please? I can't hear you, Councillor Ramsey. I'm not hearing anything now.
Hello.
Yeah,
Okay. Can I propose that we receive and adopt the following accounts? The detailed balance sheet, the income and expenditure by budget heading, the NatWest payment listing, and the Lloyds Bank payment listing. So I would like to recommend that we adopt all of those.
Do we have a seconder, please? Seconder? Yes, thank you. I've seen a couple of hands go up. Okay, does anybody wish to say anything about the accounts?
I would like to say something further. Yeah. And just to say, I know things are busy and we're having trouble with COVID, but I would still like to express my concern that the current account with Lloyds is at 385,000. And pardon me, and therefore I'm concerned that we're still over this 85,000 benchmark if anything goes wrong with the banking. I feel a bit insecure on that level, and the NatWest Capital Reserve as well, but particularly our Lloyds current bank account. I would like to have maybe at the next council meeting some sort of discussion about how we might invest some of that money rather than leaving it vulnerable in a current account. Thank you.
Okay. Is that a formal proposal you wish to make, Councillor Ramsey?
If we have time, yes. At the earliest opportunity that is convenient for the Town Council.
So you've made 2 proposals: that we accept the accounts as presented.
Yes.
A separate proposal that on a future agenda we look at investment possibilities.
Yes, please.
We've already made some decisions about that, haven't we? And it's implementing them rather than making decisions, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so first of all, sorry, Councillor North. As Councillor North wants to speak. Councillor North.
Yeah, just to make the observation, I think Councillor Ramsey has a very good point actually about this £85,000, although, yeah, I think she does. But I mean, the way to do it is to split the 385, split it into 4 pieces of less than 85,000 each, or whatever the figures turn out to be. One of which might be an account with NatWest, where we have an account already and some money invested with them. So maybe we should defer any closure of the NatWest account, because that would be an easy way. And then it's a matter of finding 2 or 3 other banks or investment vehicles. And we have this thing where they made a presentation to us a while ago, which might be one option, and other banks, put some with HSBC, put some with Barclays. They're the obvious big banks that we could simply place a deposit with, to split it up and reduce the amount that's exposed within Lloyd's. But I mean, you want to put that on an agenda for the future?
Well, we've already made a formal decision in the last 6 months to close the NatWest accounts, so I think there might be an issue there. And we have to remember that this is the current account, and we have to be careful that we have cash flow. I think the clerk wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt it would complicate.
I would like to see
because you need that cash flow to pay the salaries. It would make it a bit more complicated to manage the cash flow if it's split up. But there is the issue that Councillor Ramsey is concerned about, which is the one of security of the funds.
Okay, Mr. Clark, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, councillors will be aware that this has been a long, ongoing issue about closing the NatWest account in particular. Can I also remind members that you have voted to invest with the CCLA, and operationally we've just held off on that, trying to get the NatWest closed, which is what was a resolved item, as the Mayor has indicated, and that is still in process. And the idea was to get it all in one place. To put money in particular banks would not yield the sort of interest and return that you would get from CCLA. You also have had presented to you through the accountants Derek Kemp Associates an investment strategy which you approved this year. And you need to be mindful of that. So some of the suggestions that are coming forward, can I advise, that really are not consistent with decisions that have been made within the last 6 months. It's really a question of deciding priorities. We are proceeding with the closure of the NatWest account. The idea is to get the money into one place, i.e. Lloyd's, and then for you to decide, as has been proposed by the chairman of F&GP, to invest a sum of money in the CCLA account.
Yes.
Now, may I suggest that probably the best time to consider this would probably not be at the annual statutory meeting, which is the next one, but maybe the one after.
Yes.
And perhaps you should be focusing your decisions on how much of the money which will be on balance at well, both the the Lloyd's and the NatWest account, if the NatWest is still not closed, and there are operational reasons with NatWest why we haven't done that, mainly due to COVID. But if the NatWest is closed and it's all with Barclays, how much of the Barclays current balance should then go with CCLA, which you will not get a return from any of the other main high street banks.
So Chair, can I ask the clerk that you're actually then proposing that maybe we discuss this in June?
Well, I'm suggesting, I cannot propose, as you can understand.
No.
But I'm suggesting that you might consider that and so propose if members are so disposed to take it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I should add that I've been working with the clerk to try and get the NatWest account closed, because the clerk isn't actually a signatory because it's an old account, and it's those of us who are long in the tooth as councillors who are still signatories who are having to try and help with this. And I am trying to talk to NatWest because they've got some questions to ask after we sent the appropriate forms properly signed into NatWest. So like everything else at the moment, and particularly with banks anyway, it's not straightforward. Councillor Pullinger, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. I may be mistaken, but my understanding was under the scheme of delegation that if we had an investment strategy, that the clerk was empowered to enact it. But that, I guess that's for maybe another time. But just to the suggestion that suggestions that the clerk made, I think I'm not sure if there's we did already have a proposal to bring it to the next meeting, but I would suggest that at the first June meeting that he could come to that meeting with a proposal of to how we could implement our strategy that we've got, and what levels he would recommend we ought to maintain in whichever accounts for us to consider at that time.
Thank you. I think that's in line with what you were trying to achieve, Councillor Ramsey.
Yes.
So can you take that as the proposal, please?
Yes, yes.
So I now have two proposals on the table, and I think they've both been seconded. So the first proposal is that we receive and adopt the accounts as presented. All those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous, thank you. And then the second proposal is to bring to the first meeting in June a reminder of the investment policy and suggestions for the immediate way forward, so that we can hopefully take all this forward.
Yeah.
I hope that's a decent abbreviation of what was being said.
Yes.
All those in favour, please, of that second proposal. That's unanimous as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we're on to 10B, which is items for information. And we have the information here that the interim deputy clerk has instructed solicitors so that we can start to take the renewal of the Rose Lane lease forward. Did you wish to say anything, interim clerk?
Just to say to members, I think I sent an email out a couple of weeks ago now, advising that I had reviewed the lease, that we were going to, in accordance with the decisions previously made by council, instruct a solicitor to say that in principle the council is minded to renew the lease, subject to the landlord's intentions and any terms associated with a renewal of the lease. They have now been instructed. They are in the process of reviewing the documentation that I've sent them, and as soon as they have heard from the other side, I will revert back to council to seek your instruction on the way forward.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak on that? No, okay. So we're into, I think that should have been item 11. We're now on item 12. We haven't quite got our numbering right there. So we're into a second public open session where the public can ask questions or make comments on any subject, not just those on the agenda. So the same rules apply. We've got 15 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker. Now, Carol Birtwistle is still trying to speak to us. Can you see if you can speak to us now, Carol? Hello? Can you speak to us? I'm really sorry, but nothing is coming through. I don't know whether it's your version of Zoom or what's happening. Are you on mute? I'm sorry, Carol, there's nothing coming through, so I'll have to move on. The second person who wishes to speak is Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So on March the 10th, Councillor Russell started the council meeting by stating, Councillor Whitaker has apparently made a formal complaint to the monitoring officer of Central Bedfordshire Council and the local government ombudsman about the way the town council is preparing a neighbourhood plan. She alleges that the constitution of the working group is wrong and that the council is not following its correct statutory process. Given that I was named in this speech at a public meeting, it's appropriate that I respond and correct the potentially slanderous allegations made by the mayor. It's worth saying that I have full audio recording of this speech, which is not prohibited by the Town Council's constitution, and therefore the facts of what was actually said by the mayor are not open for debate. I've been advised by the CBC monitoring officer that I can utilise the public session to respond to these allegations. I requested all neighbourhood plan documents, including minutes, from the Town Council on the 26th of May 2019. While the Council greatly improved their website in response to my request, no minutes or notes were made available. I finally received these minutes and notes on the 28th of January 2020, and it was immediately clear to me why this council was not keen to share them. I raised my concerns with the CBC monitoring officer that if the neighbourhood plan continues in its current manner, it will struggle to pass any inspection. I asked CBC how they could better support this council to be successful. I did not make a formal complaint. The monitoring officer had to seek external legal advice about this council's approach to the neighbourhood plan, and as a result had an array of suggestions that it was decided would be fed back to this council in a non-confrontational manner. There was never any suggestion that this council was not meeting its statutory obligations. However, this council is routinely failing to adhere to government guidelines on how to develop a neighbourhood plan. The guidance states that in terms of reference, the terms of reference for a steering group or other body should be published and the minutes of meetings made available to the public. There are no terms of reference for this committee or meeting, and the minutes or notes are also not made public. The guidance also states neighbourhood planning gives communities direct power to develop a shared vision for their neighbourhood and shape the development and growth of their local area. Where a council chooses to produce a neighbourhood plan, it should work with other members of the community who are interested in or affected by the neighbourhood planning proposals to allow them to play an active role in preparing a neighbourhood plan. The current committee is made up of councillors, ex-councillors and housing developers, and recently one lay member. The rail user group have asked to become members and have yet to receive a reply. Where is the community involvement in your meetings?
30 seconds.
The guidance also states the relationship between any group and the formal functions of the town council should be transparent to the wider public. The invitation extended to UK Regeneration and Hallam Land Management to routinely be part of the planning group, rather than invited as and when required, raises a lot of questions. It's clear from the minutes UK Regeneration are providing a great deal of support to this plan, sometimes commissioning costly reports. Why is this not transparent? Why are the public not aware? Finally, I would like to suggest that the Mayor examine her sources carefully for making public announcements in future, and I look forward to a formal retraction of the false accusation and a public apology at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Whitaker. You seem determined to try and undermine the neighbourhood plan in any way you can. Much of what you've just said is totally incorrect. We are being advised by a consultant who is actually the consultant for locality, which is the part of government which is responsible for neighbourhood plans. I have had long conversations with him about what we are doing, and he has assured me that we are fine with what we are doing. We know we have a lot to do before we get to the point where we enter the formal process, where we go to a formal public consultation and then through the process to inspection. We have a long way to go with that, and we will be doing everything correct when we get to it. But at the moment, we are not breaking any rules, and I cannot understand why you are trying to be so disruptive to this particular issue in everything that you've done in the last few weeks. And I'm not going to say any more at this point. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, may I interject? I'm conscious that Carol Birtwistle has been trying to get through. She had actually previously emailed us some comments that outlining what she would like to say. I don't know whether you would feel it in order for me to read those to members, so that clearly it won't be what Carol has intended to say herself in person, but it might give members a flavour of what she was trying to put forward.
I think that would be a fair thing to do. Yes, please.
Okay, bear with me just 1 second. She says, I would like to raise a couple of issues under the public open session, item 5. I would like to follow up on the issues I had raised at the October 19 meeting. I have spoken to the residents living next to the Edward Peak School entrance in Maythorns Park, and the current lockdown regime has really helped to reduce the noise, littering and vile behaviour the residents were experiencing from the Edward Peak pupils arriving before school and causing mayhem in the park and the roads around the Mayhorns estate. I would welcome any support that the Town Council can offer residents to address the problems, as the school management has not been very helpful.
Okay. I don't actually remember that issue being raised, but maybe I wasn't at that particular meeting. I think we can only note her concerns, but it's not really for this Town Council to interfere in school issues. I'll talk to the clerk offline and see if there's anything we can do to take this forward. Okay, well, we now have some exempt items, so I'm going to bring this. Sorry,
Madam Mayor, Councillor Pullinger is trying to come in.
Councillor Pullinger, I can't hear you, you're muted.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to put something on record, if I may, in relation to Councillor Whitaker's contribution, in that she did post on Facebook in relation to the matter that she's talking about in the neighbourhood plan. I have already taken this to the monitoring officer, who has taken legal advice and devised a plan. If things continue unchanged, I will also refer to the local government ombudsman. So I think it's fair to say that you weren't incorrect in the comments that you made that she had gone to the monitoring officer at the meeting she referred to.
Thank you, and thank you for reminding me that she'd also threatened to go elsewhere to government. Okay, we now have to move into an exempt session of the council. So can I thank everybody for this evening's meeting, and good night.